Greetings, DF crew! Exclamation point. Got one here, especially for Rich. When did you shift your interests from the usual magazine-style game/hardware review focused more on consoles and console games to be more keen on the intricacies, advances of PC technology like CPUs and GPUs, and the capabilities of hardware in general? Did it coincide with the foundation of Digital Foundry and your quest for reference-grade capture methods for displaying and measuring performance in games? Now, since I get the impression that Alex and John pretty much into the PC platform since its golden years, I want to know if there's a console or game exclusive for a console that made them reconsider that the PC was the be-all and end-all. Well, I'll take my question first. It's like two questions in one here. When did I get sort of interested in CPUs and GPUs? I think it's probably when Crysis came along, because that was such a, this is tricky. Doom. Doom was the game. If we go back to, was it 94, John, when Doom came out?
93.
93, yeah. We were sort of still in the midst of Super NES and Mega Drive at that point, and then suddenly Doom comes along, and it's a game and a game type that's was just revolutionary. It was just astonishing. And I wasn't even aware of the multiplayer angle at that point. It was only until like a year or so later when I visited a game developer, Virgin Interactive in Irvine, California, that I saw people playing multiplayer Doom. And this again was like a completely different sort of experience to anything I'd ever experienced before. So that was the point where I think PC actually became sort of firmly a part of my sort of transition to wanting to know more about CPUs and GPUs. And certainly in terms of CPU performance, when we were doing this capture side of things, because there was no proper HD capture solutions back in the day, when you're streaming in like 720p or 1080p across a capture card and onto a hard drive, the file sizes were prohibitively large, so you needed a good CPU at that point. And, the single thread stuff on, the Pentium 4s and whatnot wasn't cutting it. And then AMD came along with the Athlon X2s, dual cores, Intel followed suit. That was, basically my aspirations for being able to do my job were tied intricately to the capabilities of CPU to stream that stuff. GPUs, yeah, I guess, just over the course of time, it became evident that consoles were a fixed platform with a finite level of processing power. What more can you do with any particular game? And inevitably, you end up on PC. And I think we're going to reach that point sooner rather than later in this current generation as well, until the PS5 Professional comes along. But I'm interested, John, in terms of the question here, because Guy is kind of suggesting that you were kind of Team PC all along, but that's not strictly true, is it?
I became Team PC in 1994.
Right.
But so there was this period where I didn't completely lose interest in consoles, but from about 94 to 98, most of my gaming time was focused on the PC. Mm-hmm. And it was games like Doom that pushed me in that direction. Doom, and then like Quake, Duke Nukem 3D, stuff like that. I was enamored with the 3D technology made possible in the PC. When 3D accelerator cards hit, I was super into that.
Yeah.
And I continue to play a lot of PCs since then, but there was a point, I guess, when the Sega Saturn started to get cheap in 97, my Mega Drive, Genesis nostalgia kind of kicked in, and I was like, oh man, I could totally get a Saturn for like nothing. And I started buying up a lot of Saturn games, and I found more love in that again, because it was a very different style of games. I also got a PlayStation around that era and started getting back into Japanese games. And I had friends with N64s that I also played, but I wasn't really big on the N64 at that era, to be honest. I kind of felt like the PC occupied any space that the N64 might have, weirdly enough, because the Ultra HLE also hit,
Yes.
So I was able to then again experience Mario 64 and Zelda on my Voodoo equipped PC, and I was like, well, I don't need which it sounds silly, but that's how it was at the time. But I did have a Saturn and PlayStation. The PlayStation I had did have to be turned upside down. And yeah, the visuals and stuff you could get on Saturn and PlayStation, it wasn't PC quality at the time. I mean, 1998, it's like Unreal came out.
Yeah.
Seeing Unreal running on a 3D FX card back
But
then.
what about Ridge Racer in '94
Oh god, I
on
freaking love Ridge
PlayStation?
Racer.
Yeah,
And
but
no, absolutely.
was that a sort of
So that was the one. That was the point where I felt the urge to. Well, first of all, it kind of drew me back into the arcades. I played a lot of arcade stuff, uh, and I didn't get a PS1 right away. It was just a money thing more than anything. But I played it at friends' houses, and I did enjoy the heck out of that. But it actually pushed this thing in me of like, I want to spec my PC to do this as well.
right?
And at the time, I didn't recognize enough the sheer brilliance of Ridge Racer. I loved it, but you know, just trying to match those types of 3D graphics on a PC, and I felt like I could get further on the PC as PCs were expanding. And I made it my mission to try, like, I wanted to experience something like Daytona USA on a PC.
Hmm.
And I kept feeling like, oh, surely we can do this. We're getting closer. I got Screamer over here. This is sweet. But obviously, as we know, we didn't really match Daytona for many years.
Hmm.
The PC was not the place to do that just yet. The 60 frames per second was still kind of off the table for that kind of game, I would say. So I kept interest in the consoles during 94 to 98, and I did play PlayStation arcade stuff as well, but it wasn't until 97. So it's 97 is when I actually got both of the Saturn and PlayStation on my own, I believe it
Hmm.
was. So I also made the mistake of selling my game. I kept other stuff, but I sold all my Game Boy stuff
Right.
to fund another graphics card, and I always regretted it because it was all perfectly mint boxed games that I kept all just perfect. It was awesome. I sold them all to freaking I don't remember. I sold them somewhere, and I took that money and got another graphics card.
So, Oliver, did you ever have a PC moment, or you just put
Well, it's sort of
consoles all
funny
the way?
because when I was a kid, like really young, I played almost exclusively on PCs. Like from, I'd say maybe 2003 to 2005 or 2006, when I was quite young.
Okay.
I actually had a PC with an
boy.
AMD Athlon 3800 Plus and NVIDIA 6800 GT. So quite a good
Okay.
PC for that
That is
time period
good.
in like
That's really good.
2005. But then when the seventh gen of consoles rolled around, so it would have been 10 years old, 11 years old, I got a 360 from that point and then pretty much played exclusively on consoles, never really looked back. But I always had a PC that was at least mid-range, and I did play a lot of games on PC from time to time, but only usually when they were giving me like a hugely improved experience over the consoles, like the Crysis games. And that's pretty much what I do today.
Fair enough.
Like if a game is giving me
Yep.
additional features, or if I can't hit decent frame rates on console, if like the title is 30 FPS only, I will go over to PC, but otherwise I'll pretty much stay on consoles. And I became very interested in PC technology probably around 2010 or 2011 when I was starting to build PCs for myself. So it's basically my history. But yeah, nowadays I'm still primarily a console gamer, and that's reflected maybe in my coverage, but also my recreational choices.
Fair enough. I mean, I've been thinking about this thing about whether a console exclusive made them reconsider that PC was the be all and end all. And actually, if we go back to the sort of late 80s, 1990, yeah, I've talked about this in the past, but basically, up until that point, I was using microcomputers, up to the Commodore Amiga. And yeah, when I had my interview at Computer and Video Games to join that team, man, I saw the Sega Mega Drive and it was doing things that the Amiga just couldn't do. Afterburner 2 is just like phenomenal. I just couldn't believe my eyes about that. So that was something which basically spelled the end of any interest that I had in Amiga, Atari ST, that kind of generation. Yeah, that was certainly an eye opener. So yeah, that was another thing. It's not specifically PC, although I did have a PC at that point, but it was just a word processor. I didn't even consider it for games. I don't think it could have done games at that point. It's like for desktop publishing and whatnot. So yeah, but yeah,
I'll
that
tell you,
was
Rich, though, even back in the 90s, I was already in like DF mode as a kid because like I would play or have games on like a Genesis. And then it's like, oh, there's a PC version of this, like Earthworm Jim or Pitfall. And I would want to get those versions, Sonic as well. just because it's like I want to see what this is like on a PC. Or
Right.
how is this compares? I was comparing Super NES and Genesis back then. I remember
Hmm.
like the first time I was like, "Whoa, they got a lens flare effect in Earthworm Jim on the Super NES," but like you're missing some of the pixels. And I very distinctively remember looking at all of that stuff when I was back then and being super fascinated with how these different versions of the game stacked up.
Yeah,
So
fascinating.
it kind of sent me down this path.
Yeah, I mean, I remember the day where I was working in the computer and video games office, and one of the console importers rushed in with basically what was likely to be the first Super Famicom that entered the country. And we were just kind of like spellbound by Super Mario World and F-Zero, to the point where we thought it was over for Sega. You know, those games just looked completely unlike anything that we'd seen on the Mega Drive at that point. It just seemed like the next step forward. But obviously, history turned out to be something quite different there. You actually got a really good library on both machines, and they kind of had a fantastic battle across the years there.